Hi, I'm Caden. Here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have our NFL Week 16 predictions. But before we jump into those games, just a quick update on Cal and I's head-to-head pick'em game. He had a very good week. We both had okay weeks, but he had a little better of one. He won all three of the games that we picked differently, all three of our head-to-head matchups, so good on him. Giving us totals of me with 10 points last week and Callan with 13 points last week, which widens the gap a little bit more and puts me at a total of 152 and Callan at a total of 165. So the gap is not only back to double digits, but it's a whole 13 points at this point. So it's looking worse and worse for me. But I'm still leaning on the points. That all that matters is the postseason. Gonna get those double points in the postseasons or multiplied points in the postseason. That's all I need. It's what I need to make the comeback. But let's see if I can bridge that gap a little bit with some of these games, starting with the Thursday night game with the New Orleans Saints heading to Los Angeles to take on the Rams. And in an absolute shocker, Callan and I picked differently. It sounded sarcastic. You thought I was going to say we picked the same again, but we actually do pick differently in a Thursday night game. I pick the Rams and Callan picks the Saints as his upset.
I like the Saints in an upset here. The Rams have been on a roll lately, winning their last few games, but I like the Saints in this one, who came off a big win against the New York Giants and Tommy DeVito last week. The big key here is going to be Alvin Kamara and seeing how much yards he can put up and how many touchdowns he can score, whether on the ground or through the air. He is tied with Christian McCaffrey as one of the top receiving running backs in the NFL. I believe he actually has more total yards, something like more total yards or more receiving yards than Christian McCaffrey, even though Kamara missed the first few games of the season this year. Yeah, so it's been a long season. It's been a while since that happened. But he started late this year, and he still has been able to make a huge impact on this New Orleans Saints team, and I think he's going to be the key to victory on Thursday night.
Yeah, the Saints have really changed up their offense to focus him more in the passing game. You see him very little in the run game. I can't imagine he has very many rushing yards on the season, but it doesn't surprise me that he has a lot of passing yards, or receiving yards rather, hence their passing game focus on him. But I got the Rams in this one just because, like you said, they've been on a total roll. Matthew Stafford has shown that even through all the injuries, through all the age, through all the having to play for Detroit, he can still play well. He's got a great receiving core with Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. Tyler Higbee is a very solid tight end there. Tutu Atwell is that huge vertical threat. This offense just has a lot going for it. And the Saints defense is good, don't get me wrong. But outside of Kamara, the Saints offense can't really do much, even with Chris Olave and Michael Thomas. So I do see this being a close one at the end of the day, but Rams are on a roll. They got the home field advantage here being in LA. It's a very far travel going all the way from corner to corner, New Orleans to LA. It's going to be a tough one for the Saints. I got the Rams in this one. Now moving on, we have one of the two Saturday games of this week with the night game of the Buffalo Bills heading to Los Angeles again to take on the Chargers. And we split here on this one as well. Callan has the Bills. And now moving on to me because I have the Chargers as my upset. We both got our upsets out of the way early in this one. And I got the Chargers on this one because of my classic rule, my famous rule. After a team fires their head coach, they win the next week. I don't know what it is. It happens way too often. It's not guaranteed, but it happens pretty damn often for what it should.
It even happened with Carolina.
It even happened with Carolina. I don't know what the change of pace of it is, or if it's getting hyped for your new players, or if it's just a big breath of fresh air for the players having a new head coach or new regime. But it just happens a lot. The Chargers have a lot stacked against them. Still have Easton Stick at quarterback. I think they might be getting Keenan Allen back, but he was out last week with an ankle injury. Even if he is back, he won't be at 100%. They do have Josh Palmer back, I believe.
Yep.
I think he played last week. So if they get that full receiving core there, their defense isn't really hurt. Their defense is way too good to let a team like the Raiders put up 63 on them. It's absolutely insane that happened. And I think their defense kind of reels it in a little bit and realizes like, okay, we are not that bad. Let's focus in. Let's get this done. Bills are a scary opponent, but the bigger they are, the harder they fall. I got the Chargers in this one.
Yeah, and the Chargers will make it more of a game, I think, than people realize. I believe the spread on this one is 14 points, which is one of the largest during this season. So I do believe it'll be closer than 14 points because of the Chargers getting their new head coach. I do believe that rule does seem to follow suit. It happened multiple times already this season and last season too. So that being said, I think the Bills are just on too much of a roll. They're coming off big wins from off of Dallas and from Kansas City a couple weeks ago. They're on a monumental roll and they need to get these wins to stay in the playoff hunt. They're eking closer to that wild card, and the more that they win, the closer they get to the wild card and the more dangerous they become because they're learning that James Cook can be a definite weapon on the ground. When he totaled almost 200 yards last week, I believe he had over 150 on the ground. So Josh Allen only threw 15 passes, and that's the kind of Buffalo offense that I think that can win championships.
Definitely. It is absolutely insane to say that the Bills are still fighting for their playoff lives all the way this far into week 16.
Mm-hmm.
But the NFL is crazy. It happens. Now, moving on, we have an NFC North matchup with the Detroit Lions heading to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. And we split again here. Callan has the Lions. I, of course, have the Vikings in this one. I pick the Vikings no matter what. It's pretty obvious you see that. This is probably one of the lesser confidence I am. I'll probably be even less confident in 2 weeks when we have to face them again in Detroit. But nonetheless, I do see an obvious path to victory here, and that is by winning the turnover battle. Absolute shocker. Who would have thought? But when the Vikings are able to reel in whatever shit show they're doing and not turn the ball over 3 times a game, we perform really well. We pick up wins. And on the flip side of that coin, the Lions have games where they fall apart and put up 3-4 turnovers in one game. So if we can get them turning the ball over and just protect the ball on our side of things, and we can end up +2, maybe even if we're lucky +3 or 4 in the turnover differential, that's a very easy path to a win there, especially with that home field advantage. I don't see any realm where this isn't a close game unless it's the Lions absolutely dominating the Vikings. But if we can stay ahead of the turnover margin, not make dumb mistakes, take the points when we're given the points, I do think we actually have a chance to win here.
Yeah, one big thing that gives you a chance is that it is in Minnesota, which is a huge difference maker. The Lions aren't as good on the road. And one thing about the Lions, though, I do like in this one for them is that they have Sam Laporta, who has continued to show that he possibly could even earn Rookie of the Year honors, if not one of the best tight end honors for sure. He had 3 touchdowns last week against the Broncos, so that's really impressive. It'll be interesting to see if he can duplicate any of those performances. He didn't have that many yards. He had more touchdowns than he had, not more touchdowns than yards. But he had 55 yards receiving, so not a whole lot of receiving yards.
But 3 touchdowns.
Those 3 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns, that's huge. You gotta score points to win games, and I believe that Sam Laporta will be able to help the Lions score enough points to beat the Vikings this week.
Yeah, that guy should probably be Offensive Rookie of the Year. Battle of the Iowa tight ends.
Yeah,
like
Hawkinson versus Laporta.
That's pretty cool there. Now moving on, we have another NFC North team with the Green Bay Packers heading down to Carolina to take on the Panthers. And we agree here. We both have the Packers. Callan has them as his lock. It is kind of tempting to pick the Patriots here for me. I'm not going to lie. Or the Panthers rather, not the Patriots. But it's just, there's no way. The Packers come off of a pretty overall embarrassing loss really last week, just the way they got absolutely picked apart. They're going from going against experience in Baker Mayfield to complete inexperience with Bryce Young, who's been having a very rough season. Even the games he has won, I don't think they put up over 13 points in those games. So all the Packers have to do is literally the bare minimum to pick up a win here. If they can just solidify themselves on defense and not allow so many passing yards, which should be easier to do against a rookie quarterback in Bryce Young, and just even put up 17, 20, 24 points, they should be more than golden enough to pick up a win here on the road.
I sure hope so. That sounds good. And that definitely sounds like the solid game plan. One thing you got to watch out for is Bryce Young's rushing ability. We have seen that the rushing quarterback, Tommy DeVito, can beat us still. So we can't let Bryce Young take over this game on the ground. We have to be able to shut him down through the air and on the ground because he can do it both. He's a dual threat. But I do believe that this defense will shore up. They are retaining Joe Barry for the rest of the season at the very minimum, I believe. I do believe there will be a switch this offseason, but we won't talk about that till then. At this point, I just think that the players themselves will want to play better because that secondary was pretty good and ranked near the top. So they need to get some of that leverage back and take over this game and show that they can still be a competent passing defense. One thing I really want to look for here is how well Jordan Love performs. If he is able to perform well and continue his streak of throwing good touchdown passes and setting up solid connections with Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs, and even though Christian Watson has been out, we've been setting up huge connections and using Jaden Reed as a big weapon. I see him as the next Deebo Samuel.
Amount of versatility coming from Jalen Reed.
Yep.
One thing to point out here that I forgot to, when you guys lost to the Raiders, it was because Max Crosby took over a game. The Panthers have Brian Burns, who is definitely able to take over a game the way Max Crosby can. So
hopefully Brian Burns is able to slow it down a little bit.
Yeah. So next up, we have our game of the week with the Dallas Cowboys heading down to Miami, or over to Miami, I guess technically, to take on the Miami Dolphins. And we agree again here. We both have the Dolphins. Time after time, the Cowboys have shown two things this season. They've shown that they struggle on the road, and they struggle when they face really good teams. And guess what? They're both happening in this game. They're going against a really solid team in the Miami Dolphins, who I believe will have Tyreek Hill back this week after not having him last week. And they're going to be on the road. So odds are stacked against them from the very start there. The Dolphins took a kind of embarrassing loss a few weeks ago and really came back with a vengeance against the Jets last week and just absolutely beat up on them. Now that the Ravens kind of had that close game last week and they have a really tough game this week with the San Francisco 49ers, I think that the Dolphins are going to realize we got a chance at that number one seed. We can really lock this in right here. We can really play well. They're going to give their everything against the Cowboys, and I think the Cowboys kind of shit the bed again, to be honest, just because history repeats itself. So I got Miami pretty handily in this one.
Yeah, I think the Dolphins do walk away with this one pretty sure-handedly. And there's a third thing working against the Cowboys, and that's that they have a very weak run defense. And the Dolphins are one of the top rushing teams, along with one of the top passing teams in the NFL, where Raheem Mostert leads the NFL with, I want to say, 16 rushing touchdowns.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
So he's definitely going to be able to get a few more against this Dallas Cowboys run defense. And I think it's just going to be too much for the Cowboys to overcome. There seems to be road Dak and home Dak. And road Dak is not very good. And Dak that plays from behind is not very good. He gets erratic and he panics and he gets to the point where he's just throwing interceptions and he's not playing very well. And when that happens, the Cowboys lose. And I believe that the Cowboys will get down early and they'll be down often and they'll be playing the play from behind game, and that doesn't play well for the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, playing from behind ends in a loss for the Cowboys more often than not. And then finally, for our final game here, we have Monday Night Football with a game I already mentioned a second ago with the Baltimore Ravens heading to San Francisco to take on the 49ers. And we end here just as we probably should. We both have the 49ers in this one.
Mm-hmm.
I've been watching a lot of games this year, and no matter who the quarterback is, no matter what injuries they bump into, the 49ers just seem to be the best team in the league. I'll say it. They're really good all across the board. Everywhere on the defense, they have almost no holes on the defense. On the offense, even when they have a guy go down, they have a great next man up mentality. Mm-hmm. Christian McCaffrey luckily has stayed healthy this year, but even if he sadly does have to miss a few plays, they have both John Mason and Elijah Mitchell who can come in and fill in for him very well. When Brock Purdy goes out, even their quarterback, they even have a pretty decent backup there in Sam Darnold. I just see so few weaknesses on both the starting and secondary roster for the San Francisco 49ers. And I see the opposite with the Ravens. They did have Isaiah Likely step up for Mark Andrews, which was a good little thing there. Mm-hmm. But they just don't have the depth that the 49ers have. I don't think that even at the top level, starting level, they don't have the skill that the 49ers have. And they're on the road, so just way too much stacked against them. I have the Niners in this one.
Yeah, I like the Niners in this one too. I think this will be a really good game. I think it'll be a low-scoring game, but a very competitive, close game. But I do like the Niners to pull away in this one. That defense for the 49ers is just way too outstanding. And no matter who is on the field for them, whether that's Fred Warner, Eric Armstead, or trying to think
Nick
of
Bosa and
Nick
Chase
Bosa
Young.
And Chase Young.
Probably one of the best edge
Randy
rushing
Gregory.
duos, yeah.
So they got definitely have depth on that defensive line and defensive front. And I think it's just too much for the Ravens to overcome. And I think that they're going to be able to contain Lamar Jackson, who even though is putting up MVP numbers, this will be a really big test and a really a prove-it game for Lamar Jackson. And if he's able to overcome the 49ers, then I believe that he is entered as a favorite for the MVP consideration. But I believe that the 49ers and Brock Purdy walk away with this one and start to solidify the MVP for either McCaffrey or Brock Purdy.
Yeah, I'd rather see McCaffrey get it than Purdy. Maybe that's just a bias, but I'd love to see a running back get it, and there's no running back more deserving to get it right now than Christian McCaffrey.
Especially if he plays all 17 games. 17 games,
yeah, with the bye week. So that was our NFL Week 16 predictions. Thank you all so much for watching, and make sure you stay tuned in until next week when we have our recap and Week 17 predictions. But until then, don't forget
to eat the W.